It was a night like any other in the golden age of air travel. A time when the promise of the skies was matched only by the sense of adventure that accompanied every flight. Passengers settled into their seats, flight attendants moved gracefully down the aisles, and the gentle hum of jet engines lulled travelers into a sense of security. But on this fateful flight, as the aircraft soared high above the clouds, something happened that would shatter the illusion of safety forever. Somewhere over the vast, dark expanse between continents, a passenger simply vanished, without a trace, without a sound, and with no warning. The disappearance was so complete, so baffling, that it would haunt investigators, terrify the public, and ultimately change the way the world thinks about airline security. This is the story of the disappearance that changed airline security forever. The passenger who never landed. The story begins on October 18, 1987, with the departure of Flight 3701, a routine overnight journey from London Heathrow to New York's JFK International Airport. The aircraft, a state-of-the-art Boeing 747, carried 312 souls on board: vacationers, business travelers, families, and a handful of seasoned crew. Among them was one man whose name would soon become synonymous with mystery: Jonathan Markham, a 42-year-old British financial consultant. Markham was, by all accounts, an ordinary traveler. He checked in alone, carried a single leather briefcase, and occupied seat 23A by the window. Surveillance footage captured him passing through security, exchanging polite conversation with the check-in staff, and boarding the aircraft. He was seen stowing his bag, fastening his seatbelt, and even chatting briefly with his seatmate, a university professor named Elaine Foster. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the night sky, nothing seemed amiss. The flight attendants conducted their safety demonstrations. Passengers reclined their seats and settled in for the long transatlantic journey. The cabin lights dimmed, and the world outside faded into darkness. But somewhere beyond the halfway point, as the aircraft cruised at 30,000 feet over the North Atlantic, the ordinary became extraordinary. When breakfast service began, Elaine Foster noticed something odd. Jonathan Markham was gone. His seatbelt was unfastened, his blanket folded neatly, and his briefcase remained tucked beneath the seat. Thinking he might have gone to the lavatory, she waited. But as the minutes ticked by, concern grew. The crew was alerted. A discreet search began, and the realization soon dawned. Markham was nowhere to be found. What went wrong? Mid-flight, in the hours that followed, panic and confusion swept through the cabin. The flight crew initiated a thorough search of the aircraft, checking every lavatory, galley, and storage compartment. The cockpit was notified, and the captain made an announcement, asking Markham to identify himself if he was on board. There was no response. The flight attendants meticulously retraced their steps, interviewing passengers and reviewing the manifest. Markham had not been seen since the last scheduled cabin check, approximately 90 minutes before breakfast. No one recalled seeing him leave his seat, and none of the lavatories were occupied for an extended period. The doors and emergency exits were all secured, with no indication of tampering or forced entry. As the plane descended toward New York, the tension on board was palpable. Authorities were notified, and upon landing, the aircraft was immediately quarantined. Every passenger was questioned. Every inch of the plane was searched, and Markham's belongings were collected as evidence. But the man himself had seemingly vanished into thin air. The investigation that shook the industry. The disappearance of Jonathan Markham became an international sensation overnight. Headlines screamed of a vanishing at 30,000 feet, and speculation ran wild. Was it a meticulously planned escape, foul play, or something even stranger, A joint investigation was launched by British and American aviation authorities, with assistance from Interpol and the FBI. The first step was to reconstruct the timeline of events. Security footage from Heathrow showed Markham boarding alone, with nothing unusual in his demeanor. His passport and ticket were in order, and his briefcase contained only work documents, a paperback novel, and a change of clothes. Passenger interviews yielded little. Elaine Foster described Markham as quiet, polite, and unremarkable. The crew recalled nothing unusual about his behavior. No one reported seeing him leave his seat, and no one noticed any commotion during the flight. Forensic teams scoured the aircraft for clues. The emergency exits were examined for signs of use, but all were found sealed and armed as required by protocol. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder were analyzed, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. The only physical evidence was Markham's folded blanket, his untouched breakfast tray, and his briefcase, left precisely where he had placed it hours before. Attention turned to the possibility of a mid-flight accident or deliberate disappearance. Could Markham have accessed an exit and left the plane undetected? The aircraft's doors were equipped with alarms and required significant force to open at altitude, making unauthorized use virtually impossible. There were no reports of turbulence or sudden depressurization, and the flight path showed no deviations. Investigators also considered the possibility of foul play. Was Markham the victim of a targeted attack? Yet there was no evidence of struggle, no suspicious behavior among passengers, and no motive. His financial records showed no signs of distress or criminal involvement. His family and colleagues described him as reliable and content. The lack of answers only deepened the mystery. The disappearance was so complete, so inexplicable, that it began to raise uncomfortable questions about the very nature of airline security. The reforms that followed. The Markham case sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. If a passenger could vanish without a trace, what else might go unnoticed? The incident exposed critical gaps in existing security protocols and prompted an urgent review of safety measures worldwide. The first major reform was the introduction of advanced passenger tracking systems. Airlines began implementing digital check-ins and biometric verification, ensuring that every passenger was accounted for at every stage of the journey. Boarding passes were linked to facial recognition databases, and cabin crew were required to perform regular head counts and seat checks throughout each flight. Aircraft manufacturers responded by enhancing the security of emergency exits and lavatory compartments. New designs included tamper-proof seals, motion sensors, and surveillance cameras in key areas. Any attempt to access restricted zones or open exits during flight would trigger immediate alarms in the cockpit and cabin. Crew training was also overhauled. Flight attendants received specialized instruction in passenger monitoring, behavioral analysis, and crisis response. The emphasis shifted from routine service to proactive vigilance, with protocols for immediate escalation of any unexplained absence or suspicious activity. International aviation authorities collaborated to standardize security procedures across borders. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, issued new guidelines for in-flight monitoring, emergency response, and post-incident investigation. Airlines that failed to comply faced severe penalties, including suspension of operating licenses. The reforms extended beyond technology and training. Public awareness campaigns educated passengers about the importance of reporting unusual behavior and cooperating with crew instructions. The culture of air travel shifted from passive trust to active participation in safety. The legacy of the Markham disappearance was clear. Complacency was no longer an option. The skies would never be the same. Unanswered questions that remain. Despite the sweeping changes that followed, the central mystery of Jonathan Markham's disappearance remains unsolved. Decades later, investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths continue to debate what really happened on Flight 3701. Some believe Markham orchestrated his own vanishing act, using his financial expertise and knowledge of international travel to disappear and start a new life. Yet no evidence of new identities, bank accounts, or sightings has ever surfaced. Others point to the remote possibility of a catastrophic accident, perhaps a sudden medical emergency in the lavatory, followed by a tragic oversight during the search. But the thoroughness of the investigation and the absence of physical evidence make this unlikely. A small but vocal group suggests foul play, theorizing that Markham was targeted by unknown enemies or caught up in a shadowy conspiracy. Yet the lack of motive, opportunity, and evidence leaves this theory in the realm of speculation. There are even those who invoke the supernatural, suggesting that Markham's disappearance was the result of forces beyond human understanding. While such ideas capture the imagination, they offer little in the way of concrete answers. The truth may never be known. The disappearance of Jonathan Markham is a reminder that even in an age of technology and surveillance, mysteries endure. The case continues to fascinate and frustrate, inspiring books, documentaries, and endless debate. But one thing is certain: the world of air travel was forever changed. The reforms sparked by Markham's vanishing have saved countless lives, prevented untold tragedies, and ensured that the skies are safer than ever before. The legacy of that night at 30,000 feet is written not just in headlines, but in every flight that takes off and lands safely. Thank you for watching until the end. If you know anything about this case or have your own theory, leave a comment below. And if you found this video compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Beyond Facts TV for more unbelievable true stories like this.